Peaceful Solution and Character Education Certification course. Well, we'd like to thank all of you for coming. You can all be seated. Those of you that are coming in, please feel free to find a seat. Once again, for all of you that are joining online, we're in the second edition or the second unit of the junior high series, and it's known as the acceptance unit. And once again, we continually try to remind everyone that you can download this book for free. If you're watching on Facebook, we have a link there, a PDF. You can download it for free. And if anyone needs it, we've had people saying they don't have Facebook. If they need it, just email us at info@peacefulsolution.org. You can go to our website, and you can also get that information from the website. But info@peacefulsolution.org, and we will email you a copy so you can download it, and that way you'll have it. But just keep these things in remembrance, because we're going to end up sending you a teacher's manual, and when you get into the teacher's manual, you'll find that it's lesson plan ready, and anyone can teach this. Anyone can teach this. Anyone that can, if you can count to 5, if you can read, you can teach, because it's laid out in a very simplistic format. The complicated thing is understanding how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And that's why we have the certification course, because sometimes people readily see the character unit, which we've already covered. They see the acceptance unit, and then they see that self-control unit. And everybody jumps to the self-control unit. But there's a lot of pieces in the puzzle. Even tonight we'll show where we've already covered some things in the character unit. And as teachers, when we're teaching our students, we want to continually try to draw out of their mind what we've already taught from the character unit and getting back and tying these things together so they can see how all of these little things, even as us as teachers, all of these little things are pieces to a puzzle. And if we miss one, it's not as solidified as it should be, or you have a big hole in your puzzle when you're done. So think about that as we cover this. And once again, you can turn over to page 67. That's where we're going to be tonight. So page 67. And just to recap a little bit, last class we recovered the 4 stages of what it means to decide to be friends. And then we also talked about barriers to forming friendships. And then we went over some helpful ways to deal with rejection. And there's a lot of things to remember in this. Just to clarify, once again, the peaceful solution does not ever see a need in someone's life where you could look at someone as an enemy. It doesn't make sense. When using positive character, we can all be a benefit to each other. So if someone decides that, as we talked about, that they don't want to be close friends, it doesn't mean there's not a friendship or you can't help each other. You can't be useful to each other. But you might not have that friendship where every day you go out of the way to say hello. It could be somebody you see going down the road, you just throw up your hand, or it could be somebody you see very seldom, and you don't have such as a relationship as you would have with a very close friend. So keep that in mind, because we're talking about different levels of friendship. Those come in different levels. But we also talked about the hard work that it takes to keep a friendship and what needs to be done. And if someone decides that they don't want to be close friends with you, then we need to respect that. But we also need to make sure that we don't feel angry at the person, and also that we don't feel with a rejected kind of feeling within ourselves where we think we don't have any value, because everyone has value. As we've covered thus far in the acceptance unit, there's not one more person that has more value than the next. All life has value. The way we add to the value that we can be of a benefit to society is learning the proper way to conduct ourselves and to contribute. You can have all the technology in the world that you want, and we have it today. When you look out at the United States and China and Europe and Japan and all of these countries just full of technology. But yet we all battle with a virus we can't even see. And it brings us down to where even countries are finding they have to work together by isolating borders and doing certain things to try to grab hold of this virus, as the virus is now considered the enemy of all countries. But when you think about how these things work together, without positive character, you can have all the technology you want, and you won't have peace. And we've seen that. A lot of money goes to war. Well, why do you develop nuclear bombs? As just come out in the news today, where the UK and the United States will seek to establish Australia as a nuclear power. Well, why? Why do you need the ability to destroy someone else to have peace? Why can we not just find common ground to have friendships and to build friendships? And that doesn't mean that we're going to be the best of buddies. We're going to be hunting buddies or Sunday football buddies, as they call each other, or whatever. Just respecting each other, just to have respect and to value someone's life as valuable is to be a friend to somebody. And it's important that we remember that as we move forward, because this rejection of friendship, as we were talking about it's levels of friendship. It's not rejecting someone as valuable. It's deciding that personalities, if you remember, that's what we covered. Personalities. One person, as I will never be someone's hunting buddy. And that's the example I gave. I have no interest in hunting. That's just my personality. I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I just have no interest in it whatsoever. And, I will never be someone's friend in hunting. It's just not me. But I have a son that loves hunting, and he'll be a hunting buddy to you, and he'll go with you. That's just the difference of that. And that's kind of an example you can use where, that's a friendship that I would reject. If someone said, hey, well, you want to go hunting with me? And no, I don't. It just isn't, it's just something I have no interest in. But that gives you kind of an idea of what we're talking about. We're never, ever talking about that it's okay to have enemies. That's just not right. To have an enemy is to devalue someone, to not see that they have a purpose in life or a reason for living. Well, looking here to page 67, if you'll put your finger there, we want to keep in mind what we've talked about thus far and go back to the lesson plan here on, because we're going to be in procedure 5 tonight, so it's lesson plan 4, page D. Lesson plan 4, page D, and those are the grade tab pages in your teacher's manual. And we're looking at procedure 5. Procedure 5. And once again, here it's going to get this teacher to start up some conversation. So ask students to describe what it means to conform to something. And this is something you'll find very interesting, because when we've asked students this question before, you get so many answers, and some of them, you could spend the whole class trying to figure out how they came up with that answer. But one thing you realize very quickly, most students between the ages of 11 and 15 don't really understand what conformity is. They don't really know. And one of the best examples that we've had that really puts it in the minds of the students very quickly is either a glove that goes on the hand and it takes the shape of the hand, or a sock that goes on the foot. How the sock can be flat and empty, you can roll them up, you can do whatever you want to, but when you pull it on the foot, it takes the form of the foot. So the sock conforms to the foot. And then when they start hearing that, because just about, everybody pretty much wears socks. You might not have everybody in the classroom that day with socks, but everybody deals with socks. What it does, it gets their mind thinking, it's like when you put your hand in clay or you do something, it forms. And yeah, that's it. It takes form. But there has to be some kind of pressure, some kind of application. Something has to be done to get it to take this formation or this conformity. It doesn't just evolve like our characters. For our characters to change, there has to be something that comes into play. And then you always try to bring in briefly about how these influences can lead to them. And we're going to get into peer pressure tonight again, as we covered in the character unit, how peer pressure can lead to conformity. And conformity is not always a negative thing. It can be a positive thing. Sometimes people look at things very quickly when they're not learned to, or they're unlearned to some of these words that we use and the phrases that we use. They kind of view everything as peer pressure is always negative. No, it's not. And we'll recover that again tonight, to where peer pressure can be positive or negative. Influences can be positive or negative. Conformity can be positive or negative. But that's what we want to do, and you want to have these conversations with your students. If you can get them to go for 5 minutes on some really decent examples, bring them out. Talk about what's taking place in society. Conformity to, wearing masks. A lot of people not going to say everyone did that, but a lot of people have done that. A lot of people still do that. But if you would have looked 2 years ago, not many people wore masks. Now, if you look to South Korea, almost everyone in South Korea wears a mask every day. It's part of their culture. When you see them walking on the street in South Korea, they have masks on. And here in the United States, that was an odd thing. And all of a sudden, you have masks. You go into you can go into a hardware store, you can go to a clothing store, you can go into the gas station, and there's masks hanging everywhere for sale. You wouldn't have seen that 2 years ago. Well, there was a reason that caused that to take place. But try to have some conversations about life-changing things that are caused by conformity. And, there's a little bit of pressure that causes that conformity. There's a little bit of pressure not to get into the political side of things, but think about whether a person, for example, in today, whether a person wants to be vaccinated or unvaccinated. There's a lot of peer pressure involved in that. And there's a lot of conformity that they're trying to do, whether it be positive or negative, that society, when I say they, society is bringing this upon people to do. But in the end, as the Peaceful Solution teaches, everyone needs to get the facts and then make the choice that best fits them and society as a whole. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, this conformity and what it means, thinking about it as as 11 to 15-year-old, but that's what makes us who we are. That's what brings us to who we are. So once again in the procedure, it says to talk about conformity and ask them some things. It says take a few answers, back here to procedure 5, then ask students if they think they are influenced by their friends in any way. And really try to nudge them a little bit. You have to be careful, because somebody will always say, I remember I did this, he influenced me to do it. Don't try to eliminate the negative things that take place in the classroom. And classrooms tend to get goofy, as I know teachers will know. They'll tend to be, they'll tend to throw dirty laundry out there for everybody to see. And that's something we want to guard against. But we do want to have conversation with the students concerning these things. And once again, we're going to recover some things tonight and tie it all in that they've already been through, and we're going to try to draw their minds back to that. So take a few answers, ask students if they think they are influenced by their friends in any way. Then once again, here it says have students turn to page 67 through 69. So after we've had our discussion, we're going to turn over to pages 67 through 69 in their handbooks and read the section, Who Me? Conform? Emphasize to students to be careful of who they allow to influence them. So once again, emphasize. As a teacher, that means we want to pull some examples of some positive and some negative things that can cause influence in a person's life. And we want to show them, as we covered before, the curveballs and pitfalls to things that arise in life. And there's also some examples in what we will cover to kind of paint a picture in the minds of the students also. It says they need to maintain positive moral character traits regardless of what others around them choose to do. So turning over here to page 67, on page 67 with a section entitled Who Me? Conform? So once again, questioning of I wouldn't do that. I'm my own man, or I'm my own woman. I start trends. I don't follow trends. I've heard that before in school too. I set trends. I don't follow them. And I look at them and say, where did you get your Air Jordans from? Why? I said, you followed a trend. You bought them. You followed something that was out there. You didn't start them. You followed it. And it's always interesting to see, especially in dealing with youth, because we can do the same things. We can have somebody point something out to us, and you can look back and go, wow, you're right. But sometimes the mind of a youth they're influenced, and the peer pressure comes at them, and they're completely blind to it. They really have no idea what's taking place in their life. They're just kind of living life by, just winging it, so to speak. Well, here on page 67, it says, sometimes when making friends, you might find yourself conforming or changing the way you think, act, or feel in order to fit in and be accepted. Because friendships are based upon similarities, likes and dislikes, some conforming will naturally occur. And that's one thing that when you consider, we talked about how we need to base our friendships in the 4 stages there on page 63 how it needs to be based on positive character. And there's no rush into making a friendship. You can take your time to go through the observation stage all the way down to the deciding stage. There's no rush to do this in the getting to know part of this. And there's some things that, you can, likes and dislikes. We're talking about personality there. We're not talking about whether someone likes to steal or they don't like to steal, or whether someone likes to use drugs or they don't like to use drugs. We're speaking of personalities. Notice here it says, for example, all of your friends like a certain designer shirt. Soon all of your friends have similar designer shirts. Owning the shirt has now become a standard for your group of friends. Now, think about this for a moment, because we're going to get into stereotyping and cliques and things in the next class, and I don't want to get too far into that. But think about what we've talked about thus far. Color of skin doesn't determine the value of a person. It doesn't really change the person themselves. The money a person does or does not have does not make them a better or a worse person. It's if money was determined and character was determined by how much money a person had, if you looked out in society, you would tend to think the poorest people are probably the richest in character. Because you always hear about a lot of wealthy people doing a lot of bad things. And I'm not saying all wealthy people are negative, but that tends to be what you see more of. But think about if you had a group of friends and owning something became a standard to whether they were still your friend or not. They were friends before this, and you were close to them, and you shared things with them as far as interests and ideas. But now you have to have this certain shirt. We're all going to start wearing these really nice shirts, but this one person can't afford that shirt. Imagine what we're setting in the mind of a person and how that changes society in a negative way if now you can't afford what everyone else has. That becomes very demoralizing, especially to a 11 to 15-year-old who most likely hasn't started working yet. They might be getting an allowance from their parents for doing chores, and this is what they have to live off of, and this is how they're using to get by. So if you're young and you don't have a job and you're trying to fit in with everybody else and your allowance isn't very much and that shirt costs, and if you haven't went and looked at designer shirts, you can get a designer shirt. I've seen them start for $150 on up for a shirt. To me, that's astronomical. I could buy a bunch of shirts for that much money. But imagine someone, or you can even think of shoes. Air Jordans, for example. And I'm not trying to down Air Jordans. I just remember when I was in school, I wanted to fit in and I wanted a pair of Air Jordans. And it took me almost 2 years to save up that money. And by the time I bought the Air Jordans, they'd done moved on to some Adidas shoe by then. And I'm like, I just can't. I just stick with what I got then. But I remember wanting to fit in so bad and have what everybody else had. But it wasn't there for me to have. But think about the pressure that goes into the mind to where a person, I could steal it, and then I'll have it. And that's about the only way I'll get it, which there are other ways a person can obtain things, but sometimes it could be something they're doing that really doesn't make sense, and it's a waste of money to begin with. So if you remind your students that if they're ever caught in a situation like this, go talk to someone. Remember, we talked about evaluating the needs versus wants and whether things are really important or not. You'd hate to work a whole year for a designer shirt to find out it's no longer trendy after you buy it. So once again, think about the standard it sets in the mind. But it says if you decide that you must wear that same kind of shirt, then you have conformed to the same standard. So you've set your mind that same way. We all have to do this to fit in. One of the most common forms of conformity is called peer pressure. And peer pressure is when you feel like you must behave in a certain way in order for your friends to respect you or see you as an equal. Peer pressure can be either positive or negative. And give them examples of peer pressure and challenge them. Where did we read about that in the character unit? And if you remember in the character unit, I printed the page off here so I wouldn't have to bring the whole book. But remember, it was called peer power. It was about the power that peers have on each other. It was page 70 from the character unit, which we've already covered, but you can put that for your notes, page 70. And this is how these pieces of the puzzle fit together here, because we're getting ready to talk about peer pressure, and I want you to remember the first thing that we read on page 70 in the character unit. It said, as you get older, you rely on your friends more for companionship and acceptance. So we started covering that back in the character unit about how we want friends to accept us and how peer pressure plays a lot into it. But it goes on to say that it's nice to be around others who are fun and share similar interests and personality traits as you. Sounds a lot like what we just read here in the acceptance unit. Having friends is great, but friends can also influence each other in a negative way. Here's the problem. If your friends accentuate the negative and not the positive traits in their character and encourage you to do the same, they are influencing you in a negative way. This is called negative peer pressure. Negative peer pressure can come in different forms. For instance, your friend has cigarettes and offers you one. You say no thanks, and he says, come on, everybody smokes. Even if he did not directly tell you to smoke, his response can press you into thinking that you will be an oddball if you don't. You know, if you've ever heard someone, they get into trouble for something and they go, everybody's doing it. Everybody's not doing it, else you wouldn't have got into trouble. Everybody would be in trouble. You know, so no, not everybody is doing things that are risk-taking behavior. That's kind of the scapegoat that people use to throw it on other people. Well, I just do it because everybody else is doing it. That's one way of saying I'm giving into negative peer pressure. Well, here's another example. Your friend tells you she's going to go shoplift a necklace from the mall, and if you're really her friend, you will come with her to look out. In this case, you are being pressured to make a bad choice to keep your friendship. But think about that for a second. Is that really a friendship if someone tells you you have to help them steal to be a friend? A real friend would, sadly, when she picks up the necklace, go up and tell her, if you don't put that back, I'm going to report you. I'm going to tell the police. You know? That's a snitch in today's society, though. The power of peers to influence the way we think and act should not be underestimated. And like I said, in society today, a lot of children are, not only do they underestimate it, they're completely blind to it in some aspects. And it said, so ask yourself, how can negative peer pressure affect your character, and decide in advance what you will say when approached with any negative request. So think about that as we covered that in the character unit, and think about it as we move forward here, because there's some other parts we'll pull out. But even in the character unit, we first started about how this conformity and peer pressure is a lot of it comes on wanting the acceptance of friends. We just want to fit in. We want to do things so they will be our friend. But we always have to remember, what are these people, potential friends, what are they doing that makes us want to be their friend? What interests do we have together? If it's based on popularity, that's not always a great thing. It should be based on positive character. So continuing on here, back to page 67, it says it's always right to conform to something morally positive and beneficial. Conforming to positive moral standards that help to build positive character causes no harm to yourself or others. That goes all the way back to page 8 when you remember the dividing line in the character unit between what's right and what's wrong. And our decisions need to be based on making sure we bring no harm to ourselves, someone else, or the environment. We've already talked about how the environment is much more than the birds in the air and the water in the stream and the trees and the grass. It also has to do with the conduct of the community or the conduct of the school or even the group of friends you're in at that time. That's part of your environment, as we'll see a scenario here as we read along, that it's kind of an environment at a location to where there's some peer pressure taking place to help someone make a right choice. So looking on here, it says positive conformity is when you, 1, are encouraged to obey proper authority. Proper authority. If someone tells you to do something, let's say, like we've had students tell us, well, my dad offered me a joint. He said, here, take a hit. I just listened to what he said. And my comment was, if he told you to go clean your room, what would you say? No. Okay, so you wanted to. But he immediately put the blame on his dad for the smoking of marijuana. Well, and a lot of blame does go toward that way for what was done, but we can't start blaming others for our choices. Even at 11 to 15, we have to make sound choices. We're old enough to make sound choices at that age. Notice it also says positive conformity is when you keep yourself and others safe, and that comes from making positive choices and positive decisions, considering the outcome in advance. It also comes when we are encouraged to support and practice moral values. Well, support, that's peer pressure. Support of friendships, support of the environments we allow ourselves to be into. So supporting things that, remember what a support, when you look at these beams and how they support the building. Or when you drive underneath the bridge, you see the columns that hold the bridge up. That's support. If you take away that support, everything will crumble down. Well, that support's very important. So when we go into a situation, we want to make sure there's some morality, there's some moral support, positive character supporting the situation we're going into. Otherwise, we're going into a situation that could crumble on us very quickly. And there's nothing to say you will escape the dangers that come from it either. And it could be destroying a reputation that comes from that. It could be anything. When negative decisions and influences come, the outcome, it'll always be negative. It's just the measure of it is what is hard to determine until it takes place. But this positive conformity, notice here's our example. It says, you and your friends have permission to go to the fair. To go to the fair. When there's some of your classmates you've always wanted to hang out with approach you and invite you to join them in the parking lot for a few beers. You really want to be accepted by them. You decide to go, but your friends talk you out of it, reminding you that drinking at your age, for one, it's against the law, and if you get caught, you can get thrown off the fairgrounds and escorted home by the police. Your friends also remind you that your parents trusted you to go to the fair and to stay out of trouble. Realizing they're right, you say no and stay with your friends you came with. Now that's positive peer pressure, and of course the conformity that came with that pressure of keeping those rules. And remember, as we've talked about thus far, it says here that, your parents trusted you. And remember, trust has to be earned. And when we break that trust, you got to go all the way back. It's like building something. When we were children, we would build things with blocks, and we would build them as tall as we can. And then when it crumbles, you got to start all over again. But where do you have to start if you want to build it strong? You can't just erase, that one decision. You got to go all the way back to the bottom and start building that foundation back up again to solidify it. Because you have to reestablish in the mind of someone that you just broke their trust that you can make a right choice. And this is, the friends that are here, these are true friends. These are friends that you want around you that, let's go have the beer. Let's go do it. It's illegal, but we're going to do it anyway. Well, what usually comes after drinking beers in the parking lot? How fast does that car go? And one thing leads to another. It can always get to a really bad situation. And one thing that we have to get into the minds of our students with is conformity. We can lie about our choices. We can deny our choices. We can try to erase them from our memory. But one thing we can never do is escape the consequence of the choice. That's always going to come. And of course, when it doesn't come right away, we think, I'm okay. It went okay. No, just give it time. It always catches up. And most teachers will agree with that. They'll understand that, it eventually catches up with you. But it's hard to believe that when you're 11 to 15, or you just got your driver's license and, I know how to drive. I can drive as fast as I want to. Really, how long have you been driving? A year. Well, there's people that are professional drivers that get killed in car wrecks. There's accidents all the time. And really, it's not yourself you need to worry about. Next time you go down the road, you're driving down the road and you want to talk about conformity, Watch and see how many people have this on their steering wheel doing this. You will see an astronomical amount of people texting as they drive. And I was going through a school zone the other day, and that's highly illegal. And all three people I was driving around, they all had their phone, and they were all texting driving through the school zone. And I thought, I wonder if they hit somebody, if that would make a difference. You know, because it's a really scary thing to think you could run over a child, and that seems to occur every year in Abilene. Somebody gets hit. A child going to school gets hit. It's kind of a common thing in Abilene. I'm not saying phones are the cause, but when you think about this, you know, think about your child's doing something. You're driving and doing this. Don't do that. And here you are driving on the phone, texting away. And I'm not saying that I haven't been guilty of it, but I have had a child correct me for it before, and I actually thanked them for correcting me for it because I was stopped at a stop sign, and I decided to reply yes on my phone before I took off, and they said, "You're not supposed to do that." So positive conformity doesn't always come from a person that's older than us. It can come from a person that's much younger than us. But, you know, that's part of using positive character and not looking at the child and or looking at a student and saying, "You don't know what you're talking about. Just do what I say, not as I do." You know, that's society's theme. Turning over here to page 68. Notice it says you don't need to compromise positive morals or character for the sake of friendship. If a person's going to have you do something that will bring harm to you, in the end, we have to realize it. And students, we want to really get this across to the minds of students. Sometimes you can have, we have a situation in the Peaceful Solution, we have a lot of teachers. And we always have in our disposal people that have lived and experienced what it is to grow up at a very young age, get into trouble due to negative conformity, the cities they lived in, the lack of rules, the lack of parenting, all of these things that were beyond their control, and they lost a lot of their life because of it due to having to go into incarceration or other instances. And students, for some reason, will listen very closely to their stories as they tell them. And it means a lot more when they hear someone say, "Let me tell you what my life was." And we've done that, and we've had a lot of positive results from it. It doesn't mean that you want to find somebody to tell all the negative things they've done, but you want people to say, "This is what can occur to you if you go this way, and I can tell you for a fact this is what takes place." We found that helps when you bring somebody from the outside in. We've also found it doesn't help when the teacher tells their own personal stuff, because then the students always go, "Well, you did it." But it's a lot helpful to bring someone else from the outside in to have them to kind of expound, but also not just tell them how things got broke, but how they fixed them. This is how I was able to take that situation, which was really bad, and make it great, make it beneficial, make it to where I'm now enjoying life. But it all deals with conformity, the conformity of positive character, conforming to, as we see here, the teaching of the Peaceful Solution. It says, in fact, you can have even better friends by practicing the lessons learned from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program and standing firm on true values. True values, those are positive values, values that benefit you. Remember, a value is something you deem important. So true values, and positive moral character. However, if you recognize that you have conformed to something wrong, so you're doing something and now you realize it's wrong, it's okay to change and conform to something positive. But always point out to them, you know, if you find you're doing something wrong, go talk to an adult or a counselor. Go talk to a trusted adult or a counselor in the schools. Find someone you can talk to, because sometimes these things are a little bit bigger than what a child really sees, or sometimes they think it's something they can't change. But also, when you're going through this section right here and you're talking about, you know, if you've done something and you want to make it better, let's read this next part, and then we'll go into some things we'll pull back from the character unit. It says, you are urged by the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program to become a leader yourself in guiding others to safety and teaching positive moral character. Then you will have many loyal friends. And of course, by doing that, you ask them, get in your student's mind, because we're talking about influences, we're talking about conformity, and ask them, how can you be this leader? What does it take to be a leader amongst your peers? What's one of the most important things you can do to prepare for an influence or to prepare for peer pressure? And see if you can get them to talk about what we've covered in the character unit by setting your mind in advance. Actually preparing your mind, that's having the knowledge, and then using it is having the wisdom. And that's what we really want to get into their minds. And if you remember on page 80, the setting your mind in advance, on page 80 in the character unit, it talked about to be trusted, admired, and respected and known as an honest, reliable, compassionate person is something you should want. It says the next step is to make up your mind not to be influenced to do anything that will compromise your character. In other words, determine in your mind that no one can talk you into doing something you know is wrong. This is called setting your mind in advance. Now notice it says something you know is wrong. Now we just read that you might find yourself doing something and you learn it. So sometimes we can do things and we didn't really know that they were wrong. But when we learn they're wrong, we need to be really quickly, and you need to get it into the minds of the students, be quick to fix it. The quicker you fix it, the easier it is to fix. It's the longer you let it prolong and go and go. It's like, something's broken, you don't fix it, like a cabinet door, it's starting to lean a little bit, and you just keep using it, leans a little bit more, and you keep using it, and all of a sudden one day the door falls off. And then you go to, well, I guess I better put that screw back in. Well, there's nowhere to put the screw back in. You just ruined the whole door, or the cabinet itself. It's all wallowed out now. Now you have to cut everything loose and put a new piece in. But if we would have just put the screw back in at first, it would have been much easier to fix. And try to come up with some ideas and examples to help them see the quicker you fix something that's broken, the easier it is to fix. And they'll find out in life that is very true. The longer you delay on fixing it, the harder it becomes. In fact, it becomes to the point to where you start thinking, is it even worth fixing? You know it is, but the desire to put forth the effort to fix it, well, you're conforming so much with people that, well, they broke it too. They don't really care. They're doing okay. No. Watch and see when people say they're doing okay, see how okay they're really doing. If anyone ever tells you that you got to break the rules to enjoy life, that's how you enjoy life. You got to look back and think, I don't know if that person really knows what they're talking about. If I got to break rules to enjoy life, that means I'm going to be the victim of a theft. I could be possibly murdered. I have to accept in my life that somebody can do something wrong to me to enjoy life. If I'm going to accept it's okay to break rules to enjoy life, I have to be willing to be wronged myself. And true friends will not do each other that way. True friends will encourage each other to say, no, nobody should be wronged. And that's how we enjoy life. And of course, that comes with positive conformity. But negative conformity, here on page 68, notice it says negative conformity is when you are encouraged to disobey a proper authority figure. We should only disobey authorities who ask us to do wrong. And once again, ask you to do wrong is something that would bring harm to yourself, someone else, or the environment. Asking you to do something that you consider as wrong doesn't mean it's wrong. If you're asked to clean the bathroom that you use because you've made it a mess, that's not wrong. If you're asked to take out the trash, and that's your job, that's not wrong. If you're asked to do the dishes, that's not wrong. I often tell people, well, you can either wash the dishes or buy the dishes. You choose. And they quickly go wash dishes. And they think, well, I buy paper plates. Oh, well, you got an endless situation there. You're going to always be buying paper plates then. They're going to throw them away as fast as you buy them. So if you think that's going to be easy, go for it. But always remember, because someone will always say, well, authority asked me to do that, and I didn't want to do it, so it was wrong. No. Only if they ask you to do something that could harm yourself, someone else, or the environment, that breaks the rules of morality. That's when you could be given into negative conformity. Also, negative conformity is when you compromise your safety or the safety of others. That could be in any situation. I think the most common place you'll find negative conformity that involves safety that I experienced in school, and we find that a lot of other students do it also. You can have a student that comes to school, behaves well all day, but when they get on that school bus to go home, it's like a jungle gym, shooting paper clips with rubber bands at each other and all kinds of insanity, as you have 40 people jumping all over the bus and one person trying to drive it. It's the only vehicle that no one gets a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. But they're supposed to be extremely important, and people are just jumping. Watch a school bus when you go by next time. It's rare to see everybody sitting in their seats. They're just bouncing all over the place. You kind of feel sorry for the school bus driver. But that's one way that in a school setting you can talk about, and you'll see students very quickly go, oh yeah, school bus I ride on, yeah, that's crazy. Then I remembered when I used to ride on school bus, people that were like really mellow. I don't know what the school bus did to them, but it was like party time. It was time to act goofy. But they were never like that outside of the school bus. And it could have been the people that, when you ride your school bus, you're going home, people you're riding with, your neighbors, and the people that live close to you. Could have had a lot to do with that. A lot of negative conformity going on there. Notice negative conformity is also when you go against moral values that you have set your mind to follow. So you've set your mind in advance to do it, and then you break them, you give in to do something else. And that could be as simple as doing drugs. You set your mind not to do them, but you're enticed to do them. Everybody's doing them. It could be many, many examples. And we've literally had, imagine going to a middle school, and you literally have teachers say something to them about STDs. You're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And the teachers are mindful. There's students here that have herpes. What occurs when they start spreading that to everybody else? Well, you have it for life. Oh no, they give you this medication. It's okay. But yet science has proven that it really affects your body later on in life. And it's not a positive thing. And it's sad that when we miss out on this, why do you have it? Well, I wanted to do what everybody else was doing. I thought if I didn't get pregnant, that was success. There's a lot of other failures involved in that. At least 129 of them. And there's a lot of guidance counselors that will ask you, because you're the outsider coming in that situation. You're the person they don't see every day. And you're the person that's supposed to have all these facts put together where you can have a conversation about those things, not going into detail, generalizing. These are choices you can make and things you can have to deal with for the rest of your life. But you can avoid this. But once you have to deal with it, you're kind of going to have to deal with it. It's never going to escape you. The best thing to do is not get involved in something like that. Don't allow this to be part of your life. Because once you do it, there's a lot of people that have made that bad choice without knowing. They didn't have the knowledge. And now they just have to make the best of what they can. And it doesn't make them a lesser person. It just makes them a person that wasn't taught the peaceful solution in time before they made the choice. That's what a lot of that boils down to. But this conformity, once again, can take place in a child's life and last a lifetime, negative or positive. But notice here it says, conforming to negative moral values can result in making bad choices that could have terrible lifelong consequences. And that's what we were kind of speaking about there, those lifelong consequences with decisions that are made. A lot of times with our students, when these consequences or situations come up, they just don't know who to turn to and they don't know what to do. And if you notice here in the example we give, it says your parents give you permission to visit your friends. Well, at your friend's house, some other friends invite you to come to a cool party. When you walk in, you realize that everyone is smoking pot and getting drunk. Not wanting to feel left out, you join them. Within less than an hour, there's a knock on the door, and the police enter the house. Everyone is arrested, including you. Well, what occurs when you're arrested? What does that involve? A lot of people go, it doesn't matter when you get arrested. That's no big deal. Have you ever applied for a job? They always want to know, have you ever been arrested? They don't really care how old you were when you got arrested. They want to know if you've ever been arrested. And I can tell you, I know people personally that own big very profitable businesses that offer really decent jobs here in Abilene. And they automatically, when they see yes, check, they just throw the application aside. They don't want to read anymore. And now I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, because people can change and people can learn to make better choices. But there's a lot of opportunities you can throw away just by making really bad choices of, well, I just thought I was just going to drink and smoke pot. I mean, you'll hear this a lot in school. Smoking pot's legal in so many states. You know, drinking's legal. Not at your age, it's not. And also there's rules that govern the marijuana, but it's not legal in every state. Have you ever asked yourself why? And, you know, you have to kind of stay out of the political part of it. Well, you know, it makes a lot of money. But when a student wants to smoke marijuana, and when you've had students in your class, when we used to go down to Laredo, we would have students in our class that were running drugs for the cartel. And the counselors would tell us, you have cartel runners right here in this group. They're running drugs for them. Now, you have 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds that are making $300 and $400 a week going down to the Rio Grande and bringing the drugs back and pushing them through Laredo or Zapata or anywhere in that region. That was a lot of money to them. And once you get pulled in to a cartel job, you don't say, I quit. It doesn't work that way, because they look at you as money. They don't look at you as life, they look at you as money. And it's a very hard situation. Once you're in, people find you just don't get back out. And these are things that students, young people need to be aware of. They need to be aware of these things take place. You know, when you talk about this section right here, once again, test their mind and ask them, what would you call this? Somebody gets arrested, they go to this party, they get drunk. What have we put in their mind thus far? You know, and remember page 85 about curveballs and pitfalls that we covered in the character unit. Once again, it's very important to keep pulling these things back and putting it into their minds. Because if you remember, think about the situation we just read. He went over to a friend's house to go to a really cool party. But when he walked in, he realized it's something very different. His idea of cool was not marijuana and, of course, the drinking. But on page 85 of the character unit, remember, this is what we read. It said, curveballs and pitfalls are unexpected situations that can test your resolve to maintain a positive character. And that's what the young, you can say man, young boy or girl, that's what they got caught into, was an unexpected situation. Thought they were going to hang out with friends, realized there's something really wrong going on, but they still decided to fit in. They were going to do it. We read here on page 85, continuing, it says, they come up when you least expect them and can catch you off guard. Suddenly you find yourself in the middle of a bad scene, unprepared to deal with a situation that could lead you to making a bad choice that you will later regret. No doubt that young man was regretting, or young girl was regretting what they did once the parents are picking them up at the police department. It continues on, it says here, another important part of maintaining your character is being ready to forgive people who have hurt you or disappointed you. Without forgiveness, you can become hateful and try to get revenge on that person. When people seek revenge, usually the people they hurt the most are themselves. So thinking about this situation, and why is forgiveness so important when speaking about this situation? Well, if you're sitting in the police department and your parents are coming to pick you up, what is the first thing you want them to do? Forgive you, right? I'll never do it again. That was one time. I know you don't believe me, but I'll never do it again. Well, that's the same forgiveness we should offer to other people, you know, in working with others. This, you know, you think the judgment of the wrath of your parents are coming down on you, but you're begging for forgiveness and mercy, so to speak. Well, we should think about that in dealing with others, because this is the confusion that is set up in the mind of youth. They knew it was wrong, but they didn't think there'd be a consequence. But once the police came, there was no escaping the consequence. Notice here on the very bottom of page 68, it says, negative conformity is not the path to choose. If you follow this path, you will hit a dead end. Don't follow the crowd in doing wrong. Stand up. Speak out to all with a positive voice. And that's one thing that we have to realize and get into the minds of our students and also our very own minds ourselves. Getting into a negative situation and doing negative things can never result in something positive. It's like saying, well, I didn't want them smoking marijuana, so I helped them smoke it all. That way when it was all out, it was done. They can't do it anymore. And I've heard that from people before, say things like that. And I thought, I wanted to ask, I didn't, but are you really serious about that? Is that a serious statement, or are you joking right now? You smoked it all so they couldn't smoke any. But you could tell from the person's comments that he believed it. And you really try to find words to help them see that that's just not a positive way of thinking. Well, looking over here to page 69, when it comes to conformity and friendship, remember you have a choice. And that's one thing that every student needs to remember. Every student needs to understand they have a choice. But they have to live with the choice they make. We all do. We all have to live with the choices we make, but we all have a choice. Just because you are friends with someone does not mean you have to agree with and accept everything he or she says. And you'll get that. Friends have disagreements. Friends have things that they don't see eye to eye on. And, those things are okay as long as they're not talking about something positive and negative. We should be agreeing on positive character. Now that you know the difference between positive and negative conformity, you can use this knowledge to make intelligent decisions about what you will or will not do for the sake of friendship. And once again, if you have to do something or you feel the pressure, I shouldn't say you have to do something. You never have to do something. If you feel the pressure to do something that is wrong to maintain a friendship, then go back to the 4 stages of what it took to form that friendship. And always keep in mind, you go through the 4 stages to form a friendship. That doesn't mean you're not always evaluating those things. And we should always remember, we're being evaluated too, whether people want to be friends with us or not. If we start doing things that are immoral, things that are negative, things that are detrimental to society, we could find ourselves very quickly being on the outside looking in. In society, people tend to, especially if you watch the news, or it seems like on the news more than anything else, but you see it amongst friendships, groups of friends too, when someone does something and they could just make a bad choice. People tend to talk about that bad choice that person did. And they will try to make themselves sound like a better person. I can't believe he did that. I don't know why he did that. I don't know why she did that. But she did it. Did you know she did this too? And the whole time they're trying to make themselves sound so much better when they're really just destroying the person they called a friend. That's not a friend at all. That's the kind of friend that is throwing superficial darts and knives at you and shooting bullets your way. That's not what a friend does. And think about that, because would we want to be done that way if we're doing someone else that way? And think about how that person would feel. I had a very wise man tell me one time that whenever you say something about somebody, you should imagine that your phone is calling them and they can hear everything you're saying. That will help someone chew up their words before they spit them out. And I thought, you're right. You're very right. Because you always look at your phone, first. Make sure I didn't call him real quick. And then let me tell you something. Those are things that's negative. That's negative character. So we really should consider that conformity, because always remind yourself of the conformity of the author. Just by hearing a few words, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Never get even or fight back. That's the conformity that we're trying to not only teach in words, but we have to teach that in actions. Sitting and reading a book to students or going over things with students is one thing, but then as teachers in a school, there's also some adherence to those rules that have to take place. And that's what you find in schools. Remember we went to Houston. I see a couple of teachers that were with us when we went down there. We got to Houston to teach, and they said, we really have a group of people that you're going to have to really work with. They're going to challenge you. You're going to have to bring out the best parts of your book to get these people to follow it. And we thought, man, this must be the worst of the worst. It was the teachers. That's what they took us to teach, was the teachers. And it was kind of hilarious that, and when we started teaching, we realized that there's a lot of opinionated people in this room that don't really focus on positive character. They're just, hey, I get here at 8, I leave at 5, leave me alone, don't give me anything other. I went to school to teach math, that's it. You know, and I kind of can see what they were saying. This is my job to do this, and this is something that you're giving me that I don't want to do. You kind of see that when teachers are beat down so hard in the school system. But it was kind of surprising to see that it was teachers that they were bringing to us, or they wanted us to talk to. But we've seen why very quickly. Continuing on here on page 69, we're going to finish our class up with this. It says, as important as friends are, what is even more important is to make choices that show respect for yourselves and others. If someone tries to talk you into doing something you know is wrong, stand up for what is right, even if it costs you your friendship. Not much of a friendship to begin with if they want you to do something that's wrong. A true friend will realize the importance of making right choices and will respect you for your decision. In addition to this, a true friend will admit that he or she was wrong and thank you for helping him stay on the right track. He or she might even be interested in knowing how you became so firm in your moral characteristics. Wouldn't that make you feel great? And you think about, feeling great. Sometimes it's not the words I feel great, but just knowing that you actually were able to help someone with something you were taught and you were able to help someone else. And sometimes, many times, as teachers, especially when we teach in the Peaceful Solution, you're talking to people about situations that you've been through in your life yourself, and you've probably, made the wrong choice 10 or 20 times yourself. But that doesn't mean you got to tell everybody, let me tell you the list that I have. No, you can share your experiences just by putting things out there for people to see, and people can connect to those things. We tend to think that I'm the only one in my life that's ever experienced this. No, we all experience things in life. You might come from different regions, different families offer different things, but we all have experiences in life, and the similarities are very close together. And notice here the very last thing, take a bite out of this, is setbacks and barriers were meant to be conquered. And that's by the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So when we have these things, these curveballs, these pitfalls, what we have to do is just, take a deep breath, reestablish our mind and what we know we need to do, and move forward from there. So our next class, we're going to pick up on page 70, and it'll be generalizations of stereotyping and cliques. And they'll be going into more about this conformity and what people do to fit in and how people kind of shun people due to what they can or cannot have. Or, you'll see there's positive parts to certain things and negative parts to certain things, but we should never criticize someone for anything. We should always want to help people to make better, positive decisions. So our next class is going to be on 9/19, 9/20, Sunday. It'll be Sunday at 5:30. So this coming Sunday at 5:30, why I can never remember a date, I don't know, but this is the time I never remember the date. So it'll be Sunday at 5:30, and we'll pick up on page 70. Thank you once again for joining us.